Hey, Whiskey Ringers, welcome to a brand new intro. First off, there are still a few bottles of our single barrel rye finished in Armagnac casks, picked in partnership with This Is My Bourbon podcast. Check out the show notes for links to purchase. Second, I am thrilled to announce that I've joined the Bar Cart Co-op. This group of podcasts and shows has a show or multiple for everyone. I'll talk more about them in the mid-roll. Finally, there are still two $25 spots available on Patreon. These are the last two spots that will ever be open on that tier, so if you've been putting it off, grab your spot today. There are also spots available at the $15 a month level if you want to support but can't quite commit to that $25 tier just yet. There's a spot in supporting for everyone's budget, and I truly thank you all for making this podcast possible. Hey folks, welcome to a new episode of the Whiskey Ring Podcast. Today, I am thrilled to welcome back onto the podcast Raj Sabharwal. He last spoke on the podcast close to 2 years ago now. It's been a little while, but now we have him back on to talk about Amrut Distillery in particular, and also give us a little insight into the burgeoning, shall we say, Indian whiskey market, single malt and otherwise. So Raj, welcome back on.
Thank you, David. Great to be here.
Awesome. Really looking forward to these. So as part of the interview today, we have three releases from Amrut, or rather three releases under the Amrut name, I should say. The single malt rye that came out recently, the Narangi, and please correct my pronunciations, and the Chaparva. And then the fourth release we have here is put out by Amrut, but is under the Single Malts of India line. So it's Single Malts of India Kurinji. So excited to taste all of these. All of these are relatively new releases within the last year or two, I believe. The Chaparva, I think, is 2020.
Probably last year. Yeah. Last year, late last year. Yeah.
Right. So, as I said, I want to also get a little more into the Indian whiskey scene, which we didn't talk too much about last time, although we did introduce the Amrut core expressions of both Amrut and Amrut Fusion, which were fantastic. So, as we get into this, where do you think we should start on the pours?
Well, I think let's do a perspective or an overview of the Indian whiskey market and Indian single malts in particular. And so I think starting with the Single Malts of India line, the Kurinji Single Malts of India was something that Ashok Chokalingham, who's the head distiller of Amrut, had this idea, and he registered the domain name and the whole concept because he could see the future of what was happening in the Indian single malt market. So this is the second release that they put out. There are currently 24 operating single malt distilleries in India, with 6 more being built, and all of those ones that are being built are by the foreign producers who have come in. So Diageo, Pernod, Ian McLeod, and recently you may have seen Pernod announced a joint venture with one of the states in India, and they're building the largest single malt distillery in India, which will supply all of Pernod's needs. And Pernod's been in the Indian market for about 30 years, and I'll get more into some things I blame them for, and some things I thank them for. But when Amrut launched their single malt in 2004, it was export only, and that was because at that time there was a feeling by Neil, who is the founder of the godfather, if you will, of Indian single malts, and he passed away about 4 years ago. But he's the one who said that at that time there was not an appreciation domestically for single malts. There was a lot of Indian whiskey is there. That's the 5 of the top 10 largest selling brands of whiskey in the world are Indian whiskeys. However, what is normally sold as whiskey in India, called Indian whiskey, would not be able to be sold as whiskey anywhere else in the world, because it's usually made out of a neutral molasses-based spirit with some grain alcohol or imported whiskey added to it. It fits the category of Indian-made foreign liquors.
Mm.
IMFL, which is a concept for anything that's sort of trying to duplicate something else. It falls under the category of IMFL. Um, so 20 years ago, that was the case, but today, and it was funny after Amrut launched it, about 4 or 5 years after, so 29, 2010, people in India would start calling the distillery and saying, "Where can we buy this?" And they were told, "Well, you have to leave the country because it was only available outside of India." But today, the demand for Indian-made single malt whiskeys is 5 times more than can be supplied in the market domestically by the producers. Indian single malts last year overtook Scottish single malts sales in India. So you combine Glenfiddich, Glenlivet in total, and the Indian single malts sales surpassed it. And nobody predicted that. And I, for one, wasn't sure 15 years ago where things would go, but certainly launching Amrut in the US market in 2009, I think now has set the standard for, or the open the door for other Indian single malt brands to come in.
And I wanted to jump back in history just a little bit to set a little more context to. And as we're doing so, I think I'll pour a little bit of the single malts of India, Kurinji. So we have, of course, India being, there we got it right on the screen there. So, of course, India being a under British colonialism for many, many years. Love that.
Too many.
Too many years, yes. Any year is too many, but indeed too many. There is, well, two kind of angles I want to take here. The first one being there's an obvious connection to be made from British colonialism to India's love of whiskey.
Yes.
As much as it is perhaps to India's love of rum as well, and molasses-based spirits.
Yep.
So when, I guess the way that I want to ask this is, was there anything like a just going to the history, I guess, a distilled spirit native to India prior to colonialism?
Well, you mentioned rum, so there was a product similar to, well, there was a couple of products similar to rum, basically Iraq. It was made from coconut palm that was distilled. I mean, there's historic evidence of distilling in India going back to, I think, I can't remember the exact date, but early, before BC. I mean, there's evidence of distilling that was going on then, and so a lot of it, there's a pretty famous or infamous spirit in India made from cashew called the feni, which is found in the southern part of India, and it is for people who have an acquired taste for it. It's not the most potable spirit out there, but there are references to other spirits. So rum-based Iraq kind of spirits. India is, a lot of people probably don't know this, but sugarcane is not indigenous to the Caribbean. Sugarcane came from India, Indonesia, Sri Lanka to the Caribbean in the 1700s when there was a growing European demand for sugar. The Europeans took sugarcane as well as workers, indentured servants, basically slaves that were given passage and had to work off their passage by working the fields, and so they brought the sugarcane and planted it to produce sugar, and obviously leftovers from that were used to distill and make rum. But there's history of rum-like products or rum being produced in India a long time before rum became a major product from the Caribbean.
And then there's a parallel that I kind of stumbled upon. So recently we had Kate Perry on the podcast to talk about Hamden Estate, rum distillery in Jamaica. And she pointed out that before, pretty recently, to be honest, not many Jamaicans, native Jamaicans or people on the island were drinking Jamaican rum. And when I was listening to different interviews and reading interviews for in preparation for this interview, I was hearing kind of a similar thing back a few decades ago in India, where you had Indian whiskey, whether it was what we would call whiskey in the US or the blend of molasses based and grain based, but that kind of the single malt in particular was not really drunk domestically.
Mhm.
And maybe that correct that comparison if I'm wrong there, but it was just an interesting parallel to hear about in two colonialist areas and two different spirits, but it seems to have the same kind of effects.
Yeah, I'm trying to I mean there is certainly a parallelism there, but it's spirit consumption in India back in the British Raj era was limited to the upper classes, so to speak, that they they saw and witnessed the British soldiers and British royalty consuming whiskey and alcohol and wine and everything else like that. And when they would have guests over, the more wealthy upper class would serve that, and so it was pretty much limited to that. It was not something that was affordable by the average person in India, and frankly, there was not a lot of consumption of alcohol in India, and it's got nothing to do with religion or anything else like that. I mean, now it's huge, but back then it was primarily limited to like the people who could afford it, because it was pretty pricey. I mean, you had lower wages. That was a luxury item that if you could acquire it, you would. Um, but to when people started watching the soldiers drinking and everybody else, that's when they sort of said, "Oh, well, this looks good. This is interesting. Let's try this." And I mean, today there is 600 million liters of alcohol consumed per year in India. 600 million. Now, yes, there's 1.4 billion people, but if you discount, children, people don't drink for religious reasons. People don't drink for whatever the female population is today has started drinking. There's you go to certain cities, you'll see them in the pubs and everything else like that, and they probably have a better appreciation for it than a lot of the men do. But the whole concept of alcohol consumption by the general populace is only really started happening in the last 25 to 30 years. I mentioned Pernod earlier. When 30 years ago, when they came into the Indian market, they were one of the first ones to, for lack of a better term, dumb down the spirit. So some of the whiskeys, the higher end products made in India, actually had more malt added to it. I mean, Amrut's first product that they were domestic whiskey they were selling, called Macintosh, Maquintosh, SH. They were adding single malt to it to give it some depth and character. And then when Pernod came in and started adding lesser grain alcohol to it to make it cheaper and more affordable, that Amrut was left with all these barrels of single malt, trying to figure out what to do with it, and because they couldn't compete with what Pernod was doing. But their philosophy, Amrut's philosophy, has always been quality over quantity, and Neil has drove that to his son and son-in-law, who are now the co-managing directors of Amrut. That above else, you got to look at quality, and quality's got to be there, and that's what they're so focused on.
And with that, we'll take the first break and dive into this spirit. So the idea of single malts of India, like you said, Ashok got the copyright on it. He got the URL for it, which was smart, because I know single malts of Scotland has taken off, and other single malts of insert country here. So what goes into the sourcing and production and blending of
Right.
these releases?
So much like Scotland, in India, there are five geographical regions. If you look at historical texts, and I mentioned all the number of distilleries that are making single malts in India. A lot of them are small. They don't have the capacity or want to sell or market their single malts. So
Mhm.
Ashok has been able to source single malts from these particular distilleries. This one is from the Kurinji you're having is from a particular distillery based in the highlands of India. The first release they did was called Nidal, which was from a coastal distillery in South India, and a totally different character. It was slightly peated. You could taste that salinity because it's coastal aged. And Kurinji, what you're having now, is different. I mean, it's all 100% malted Indian barley. But Ashok purchased this as new make, and Amrut has matured it and uh, you know matured it and bottled it to sell to the marketplace.
So,
But again, the whole concept of this is to showcase the different single malts that are being produced in India. So he plans to do a few more. But the unfortunate thing now is a lot of these producers are realizing that there is a growing demand for Indian single malts. So I don't know if they would be as happy to part with their whiskeys as they might have been about 5 or 6 years ago.
there. I mean, the first thing that comes to me with this, and this is, I should say, it's not age stated, but it's at 46% ABV.
Right.
And what's notable about this, and I find this with uh, many Indian whiskeys, both Amrut and not, and this kind of being non-Amrut, if you will, is just the mouthfeel.
Mhm.
And it's something for 46% ABV. Uh, Malt already has kind of a jump ahead from corn-based or rye-based distillate, so it feels like more at 46%, but this feels like even more than that. And you said that it was 100% Indian barley. So are we talking 100% also the 6 row Indian barley as opposed
Correct.
to 2 row?
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
what does that
So
do
grown
for the
north of
do for the
India.
spirit?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say what does that do for the spirit?
So when you 6 row barley, obviously the kernels are smaller than 2 row barley. You get a less carbohydrates, more nitrogen in there. It gives you a richer distillate, but a lower yield. So you're getting less to work with. But as you can tell by the mouthfeel and the flavor in there, you get a lot of depth to the spirit. You're getting all of those. It's non-chill filtered, non-colored. You're getting all of the rich oils and fats that are still in there, and that contributes to the nice rich mouthfeel as well. But I think the barley itself also has a huge factor in there.
So it really does, and you can, I know it's audio, but in the glass you can see how oily it is. The rims hold, the legs are, well, there are a lot of them, I should say. Many legs. The droplets are large. They're holding together and sloughing down, so they have weight to them, even in those little beads. And on the palate too, it's very coating, heavy, in a good way, filling. Again, I would not necessarily think of this as 46% ABV. It drinks. I would say it drinks a little bit above proof. Maybe it.
Mhm.
I mean, we're talking small amounts, like at maybe 105 as opposed to 100 proof. Not a huge difference, but it does have some slight spice to it. And with this being something that Ashok got new make from and then aged at Amrut in Bangalore, pardon me, I'm wondering what, in theory, would this spirit have tasted like where it aged, where it was distilled, versus
Mm.
what we're experiencing in the glass now?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I think, Amrut is based in Bangalore. There's 3,000 feet above sea level. The climate is extremely conducive to year-round comfortable living. The average temperature in the winter is about 75 degrees. It's with about 45% humidity, so very dry.
Mm.
In the summer, 125, 130, with about 75% humidity. So the being at that altitude, they don't get a lot of humidity in there. So that obviously affects the maturation of the spirits. Your When you have a drier environment, David, as you know, you
Mm.
lose more water than alcohol, so the alcohol strength goes up. And Ashok likes to say that Amrut's the missing link between Kentucky and Scotland because they're making whiskey like they would make in Scotland, but it's maturing like it would in Kentucky. Because Kentucky has that same sort of climate, and you fill the barrel at whatever proof is required, but invariably it ends up being higher coming out of the barrel than it was filled in, which is what happens to Amrut. Amrut on their environment, they lose an average of about 12% a year angel share.
Wow.
So if you think about
Yeah.
5 years, 50% of your barrel's gone. So
Yeah.
you don't have, you can't age for a super long period of time. Most of Armour's the core lineup is 5 or 6 years maturation. But there's an equivalency of 1 year in Bangalore is like 3 years in Scotland.
12%. I mean, I don't know that we've talked to another region that has that consistently high of an angel share. I think maybe somewhere like a Texas or
Texas, yeah,
the highlands of Texas, I guess, but it's pretty rare. Let's put it that way.
yep.
And with the just lost my train of thought on which quest I wanted to go with next. Um, so you were talking about having 24 distilleries making single malt in India right now, with 6 more coming online, and all of this demand, and 5 times the demand versus 1 to 5 of this demand to supply. So going back 20 years now, where Amrut's putting out its first single malt, and maybe even a couple years before that, where they're uh, distilling their first single malt and thinking about
Mhm.
how they're going to market it. I know this was um, before Glassware of Imports and before you were working with them necessarily, but what kind of made that time the time to enter into single malts for India?
Yeah, that's a good thing. I mean, Rick, Neil's son, was doing his MBA at University of Newcastle and trying to decide what he's going to do his paper on. And his dad said, "Well, we have this single malt and sitting here. Why don't you do it on whether or not we would be able to sell Indian single malt to the world?" So they Rick and Ashok was actually studying his MBA at University of Newcastle along with Rick. So they became friends and they sort of did this together. But they took bottles of the single malt to the pot still bar in Glasgow and had the owner pour out when people came in. They said, "I'll give me a dram," and he would give them this and said, "Try this." And Rick and Ashok just sat back and listened to the commentary. And people were like, "Oh, it's a Highland, it's a Space Side, it's 10 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old, whatever." And when the owner pulled out the bottle and said, "No, it's Indian and it's 4 years old," and they were like, "No way, this is can't be." So just based on the feedback, they thought, well, okay, we've got something here. Let's give it a go. So it was first launched in the UK in 2004, and it was a tough struggle the first year. Ashok was appointed sales director. I think the first year they sold 100 cases, so 600 bottles in the UK, and that was a lot of work to
Right.
do that. And they were like, "Well, this isn't going anywhere. We'll give you. We decided to give you 3 years to see what you could do," and slowly, it started taking off. I mean, originally his approach was hitting Indian restaurants, thinking that that would be a typical market for it, but it wasn't. I mean, if you've ever been to the UK, majority of Indian restaurants are, beer, right? You go in, you get beer. You're not going to do cocktails necessarily. I mean, aside from the higher end, the better Indian restaurants, but beer and maybe wine if you're lucky. But now, I mean, every Indian restaurant in the UK that's worth its name has Amrut, has Indian single malts, wide selection of them being used in cocktails, being used for straight pours. Higher end bars, I'll carry it, and it's incredible. I mean, I never envisioned, David, 15 years ago that this is where we would be with it. I thought, okay, I liked it. I mean, when I was first introduced to, I called my business. I grew up in Canada, as you know, and my business partners called me and said, "Hey, we got this Indian whiskey we're selling in Canada, and they want to come to the U.S." And I had just moved to the U.S. and my first reaction was Indian whiskey. There's no good Indian whiskey. What are you talking about? Because and all the times going to visit family in India, my brother and my cousins would come over, drink whiskey, and we're like, what is this stuff? So there was, nothing of note back then, but today certainly that's changed, and the middle class population in India is their disposable income is growing so rapidly. They think nothing of paying $150 US for a bottle of whiskey, which was unheard of before.
Right. It's, I mean, to think of what's gone on in the last 20 to 25 years, just in single malts and whiskey in general.
Hmm.
But I mean, this was in 2004. This is the first, with the launch in the UK, the first exported Indian whiskey, as we would think of whiskey. I don't know if the kind of molasses and grain base was exported at all, but
Not back then.
yeah,
I mean,
but
maybe to the UK a little bit for small consumption, but nothing of note. I mean, yes,
yeah,
Amrut single malt, the classic single malt was the first exported single malt. I mean, made according to the SWA regulations. Malted barley, yeast, and water going into it, aged for a minimum of 3 years. I mean, Amrut's always followed the SWA regulations. They want to stick to that.
mhm,
There is, currently with all these distilleries out there, there is an association of single malt producers in India that's trying to codify how it should be made. And everyone's agreed it's got to be a single distillery, it's got to be malted barley, pot distilled. The only sticking point is the minimum maturation period.
of course.
Some are saying one, some are saying two, some are saying three. It's very similar argument that was had in the US when the American single malt category was tried to be established. I mean, the TTB still hasn't signed off on that, but
We're still
that was
waiting.
one of the big things. So yeah, that I think that will be resolved soon. I think it needs to be, but it may well end up being a minimum of 2 years. I mean, Australia's 2 years. Other countries have a 2 year minimum maturation. Yes, Scotland has 3 years, Ireland has 3 years, but don't forget the climate there is different than India, Australia, some of these other countries where the spirit matures a lot quicker.
And with this, I'm going to start pouring the Amrut Triparva.
Yeah, do the Traparva. So
Yeah, yeah.
the
It's worth noting. Oh, sorry, it's just worth noting. Recently, with an episode going live very recently with Lost Lantern, an independent bottler
hmm,
here in the U.S. of American
yep,
whiskeys. We were discussing their most recent collection for this spring is based on the Midwest and how the climate of the Midwest is very different from that of even Kentucky. Even if you're just going, from for U.S. listeners, if you know from Louisville to Starlight Distillery, one of the ones highlighted, it's 25 minutes. It's not a long time, but
yep,
it's enough distance to be significant climatologically. And then when you go to different regions of the U.S., we've got whiskeys from Arizona and New Mexico, Texas that are ready in a year because
yep,
the aging is just so rapid there.
right.
And with what you said about the Indian market, let's say, or the Indian distilleries kind of coming together, is it are these regulations or agreed upon rules, let's say, coming together more from the industry side, kind of like we saw in Japan,
Yeah,
or is it
I
more
mean,
legal?
the
Yeah.
government there, so it is an association of the distillers in India, but there is some government involvement. I mean, they want to make sure that it's codified by the government. Everyone agrees to what the standard's going to be. So they're, like I said, they've agreed to the basic principles. The only debate right now is the minimum maturation period. Um,
Right.
but I think that'll get resolved sooner rather than later.
And of the three, last question before we dive into the Triparva, of the three kind of major Indian distilleries that we see in the US, let's say, we've got one based in Bangalore, one in Goa, and one in foothills of the Himalayas. These are three very different climates. And I could see how something, let's say, aged in Goa could be done in a year, 2 years, and be ready to go because it's hot, it's humid, it's Amrut may take 2 to 3 to 4 years, a little bit longer. I know with 12% angel share there, you're not going to go much longer than that, most likely. But and then the foothills of the Himalayas, you're getting more temperate, cooler, more humid. So these are three very different areas
Right.
that it's almost like if you put. I did this before the episode just to make sure I had this in my mind. If you put India geographically on the lower 48 states, it takes about a little over a third of the landmass and would stretch almost perfectly from the Canadian border to the southern tip of Texas. So you've got a good 12 to 1500 mile differential, top to bottom, and then side to side, you're going a good 1000, 1200 as well. So this is a massive land area with a lot of different climates where you're trying to agree to a minimum age statement. And so it's not as easy as I don't even know where I would say it is easy, but I guess it's not as easy as Scotland, where even in the very south of it, in Edinburgh, you're not getting too many 100-degree days versus cool winters. Getting maybe a few more
Yeah, yeah,
recently,
true.
but
Yeah, I
you know,
mean, you're right. Things are changing, but certainly, if you look at the most northern distillery in Scotland, can't remember. I was at a meeting earlier today, and I can't remember. There is a new one that's the most northerly, which is the it's on Orkney, but it's actually high further north than Highland Park. So
oh, there's a
that
new
is
one. Okay,
And then there was supposed to be one being built on the Shetland Islands, which would even be further north because it's almost to Denmark. But
right.
you do have variations. And obviously we all know the coastal to sea air. You get whiskeys from Islay and the distinct saltiness that comes from some of those. And likewise, I mean, none of the distillers in India are trying to replicate or be Scotch, right? They're doing their own thing. Yes, they're using barley. Yes, they're using pot stills for distillation. However, the environment in which they are matured has such a factor anywhere, in making those. And the oldest distillery in India was established in the 1800s by actually a British officer, Robert Dyer, who came over. And originally it was a brewery, but then they added a distillery to it, which is still operational, but it's moved from where it was in the foothills of the Himalayas to a little further south, and it's still operating. But then you have all these other ones that Amrut. So the Amrut celebrated their 75th anniversary last year, being established in 1948. And you have some newer distilleries that were set up in the 90s and all the ones that are coming up now. But they're domestically, yes, they see the demand, and now you have the Europeans coming in because they see the potential of the Indian market, and it'll be interesting once Diageo or Pernod or Ian McLeod or somebody else decides that, okay, we're going to export our Indian single malts that we're making in India to the outside market. And that will really, once that starts to happen, that will really establish Indian single malts as a category. I mean, it's already happening, but I think there's going to be more. I mean, we're probably where Japanese whiskey was 10 to 15 years ago. You know, it was still sort of under the radar, but I mean, now the demand for Japanese whiskey is higher than the supply. And you know, obviously it's reflected in the pricing that's being charged for it. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen to Indian whiskeys because I as a consumer as well as somebody who sells it and brings it in, we got to keep stuff that's going to be affordable for the consumers.
Or I want to dive a little bit more into the demand aspect too, but to take a little break going into this Amrut Triparva. So, as you said, Indian whiskey, mostly following the Scottish tradition, uh, SWA regulations, pot stills, 100% barley. But this one is triple distilled
Correct.
instead of double distilled. And I mean, more familiar certainly with the Irish tradition of triple distillation, but not so much with Scottish. There are a couple of Scotch distilleries making
I
triple
mean,
distilled.
Auchentoshan is probably the most
Yeah.
known triple distilled. Springbank with their what's the triple distill that they have that they started doing in the 90s. So I'm drawing a blank on the name of it, but
You would know better than I would on that one,
uh,
Simon.
and there are a few more that some do it 2.5 times, triple distill, but this is something that this is the third release of this, and it is 100% Indian barley. It's exactly the same as what you would have had in the classic single malt, but it's triple distilled. And enjoy this because it's the last time that Armlet's going to make this. And the reason is because it ties up the equipment. You're in the period of time it takes to make this triple distilled Triparva, you could do a couple of additional runs for the single malt.
I mean, that's fair. You're effectively doing, even if you're just doing a crude calculation of 3 times versus 2 times, it's another 50% of time that you have to take on there.
Right.
Yeah. That is
So
such a different flavor
profile. Yeah, it's bottled at 100 proof, 50% ABV. Non-chill filter, no color added to it. It's but it is different than you mentioned Irish. It's certainly different than any Irish triple distilled single malt.
Sure.
And it would be different than any Scotch that is triple distilled, the few that they are. Hazelburn is the one from Quebec. Yeah.
I haven't been inculcated into the cult of Springbank, unfortunately. So I have friends who are, and every time it comes here, once, twice a year, they go crazy.
Yep. Yep.
I certainly would not mistake this for an Irish whiskey.
No, definitely not.
In any way. It's not, maybe it's a tiny bit lighter in profile, but not so much like you would compare an Irish double distillation versus a triple distillation. It's not that much kind of taken out of the spirit on the third run.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And oddly enough, I'm getting, this is a really specific flavor note for it, but I'm getting an Arnold Palmer.
Like interesting.
A lemonade black iced tea mix.
Yeah,
and
I can see the tea, and certainly there's most Amruts do have some citrus notes to them, whether it's lemon or orange. So that's still prevalent there. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and this one I think feels like it drinks right at proof, right at that 100 proof mark. Very drinkable though. A good kind of summer whiskey. I can imagine this being to whiskey what a summer shandy is for beer. In many ways.
Interesting. Yep. Yep.
Just that, like I said, it's not so much lighter, but it's just that little bit lighter where it's like, warm weather. This might go down a little easier than, let's say, the Porto Nova, which I love that one, believe me. But this one will be a little easier to knock back a few of them.
Yeah, well, the Porto Nova is 120, 22, 23 proof. So yeah, it's I mean, it's still very palatable, neat, but certainly this is a lot easier to take. Yeah, I mean, it's and the difference too is that Ashok, when he's distilling, he's taking very tight cuts. He's very concerned about, where the cuts are taken. Very long fermentation. Amrut traditionally goes 7 days fermentation,
Mm.
and very slow distillation that's going on, and then obviously the maturation in ex-bourbon casks, sitting in those warehouses and losing all they do over that period of time. So this is about I think 6 years maturation.
It's so it's interesting to hear it's 6 years. I wouldn't have guessed it had gone on that long, and that's really no judgment either way on it. It's just that given this idea that you're losing about 12% a year, and it's I would expect it to be woodier, I guess, at 6 years. And I'm very sensitive to over oaking and having too much wood in the
Mhm,
whiskey. I
mhm.
really like I'll drink Lefroy before I'll drink something that's like chewing on an oak stave. It's
Yep.
no offense to Lefroy. I've been hitting on them a lot recently, and it's look, it's just the style of peat I don't like. I respect it. We'll move on. But anyway, um, yeah, I'm surprised at this being 6 years old because I would expect it to be much more tannic, even with a used cask. But it's not. It's very balanced. There's enough oak to give body, perhaps, and a little bit of spice in there. But yeah, it's just very well contained and well crafted.
Well, I mean, don't yeah, thank you. I mean, don't forget that the over the even over a 24-hour period in Bangalore, you get this period of time at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning when the temperature takes a little dive before it goes up again. So the barrels over a 24-hour period go through multiple expansions and contractions. So you're getting a lot of interplay with the spirit and the wood. And I mentioned quality before, and it's really particular about where they get their casks from, who they're getting the supply from. So it's making sure that the quality is going to be reflected in the spirit.
And I think back in maybe late fall, early winter 2023, like in November-ish time, if I remember correctly, Ashok was here doing
He
a
was. Yep.
doing a tour, and some to some on the sales side, but also to secure some barrels and get more supplies. So
Yep.
clearly, if you're not just saying we want to get I don't know if this is the distillery, so I'm just using this as an example, but let's say he says, okay, we want to use barrels from Maker's Mark. It's not just saying, okay, let's import some barrels from Maker's Mark. He's going there and figuring out,
Hmm.
okay, which barrels do we want here?
Yep.
Which says a lot about the quality control that goes into this. And
Right.
he's playing a dual role of now head distiller and global sales director as
Yep.
well. So
Yep.
that's a that's a lot to kind of balance
It
going
is.
around.
It is. Yeah, yeah. And he'll be here in April. He's spending the whole month of April in Texas. Or I'm going to spend a week with him, and we're going to be in San Antonio and Austin and Waco over that period of time. But just you know, I'll have him running for for 7 days. But he wanted to come, so we got to make use of him. So
If you're going to Texas, better April than August. So
that's true. Good point. Yep.
yeah.
Yep. So yeah. So I mean, like I said, the Trabarba, it's the last time it's going to be made.
And is that kind of common knowledge at this point that it's the last time it's going to be
Yes.
made, or so people started making runs on the bottle yet?
Um, I think it's still sitting under the radar a little bit. I mean, this is like the third time they've done this, but for whatever reason, I mean, it hasn't the word hasn't gotten out yet about it. The last time we got a smaller quantity. This time for the US, we had 1,200 bottles,
Mm.
our allocation, and we tend to get at least a third of whatever special releases come out there. So whatever the total output is, about a third of it's destined for the U.S. market.
I mean, I'm glad to hear that because that means we'll get all those releases.
Yep.
I
Well,
am sad that
we
this is
are. Yeah.
yeah, I'm sad this will be the last time that this will come out, but if it's still going under the radar, I would definitely have a bottle or two of this just stashed away. I'm really loving that Arnold Palmer note. I just can't. It's very stuck on me. So
Hmm.
I'll have to try it again at different times, see if I get different notes. Obviously, try it blind, but um, yeah, I love it. With so the U.S. is, as I heard, now the number one export market
Yes,
for
we are.
Amrut.
Yeah.
So looking back, you were mentioning earlier how you only sold 100 cases, not you, but Amrut sold 100 cases in the UK in his first year in 2004, hit 3,000 cases by 2008. So a little bit of growth, but now we're selling 15,000 cases, and this across the portfolio, just in the US
Right.
yearly.
Yep. Yep.
And that's massive growth, even over let's say 15 or 16 years since 2008. It's 5 times growth.
Yep.
So is this presaging the growth and demand that you're seeing in India now, or is it following kind of
Yeah,
the same path?
absolutely. I mean, so in India, the domestic demand for Amrut is 5 times more than they can supply. That so the anytime Amrut gets released into the marketplaces, we're lucky if it lasts, a few days on the shelves
Yeah.
before it's gone. The So Amrit, when the original distillery, where they had the pot stills that were making the single malt, they realized that that was not enough capacity, so they built a second distillery next to the original site, on the same property that Amrit owns, and it's dedicated only to making malt. So it had two wash stills, two spirit stills, trying to remember, six or eight fermentation tanks, open washbacks, and but that gave them about a total of about a million liters a year, up from 300,000. And that's not enough. So they just put in another pot still in the old distillery, which they will make malt from. So that'll give them a total of about 1.3 million liters per year, but that's it. They can't make any more than that. There's no room to add. There's no room to expand the distillery. If they want to expand, they have to either look at another site or put up a distillery in another state.
It's I guess that's well, you tell me. I mean, I know how it would feel from a consumer side, but from the production side, and from the side of someone who is trying to bring Amrit into these other markets, meet domestic demand, sell the products. Do you look at that cap and think, okay, this is a good thing because it'll drive up not only scarcity but uh, immediate demand, so people are getting the bottles faster? Or do you look at it as, well, yeah, it's a short term thing, but long term we might have a problem?
Well, I think we already have a problem. I mean, certainly in
Fair
the
enough.
Indian market, but and there have been times over the years where we've been told we can't get any more, peated whiskey, because all that needs to go towards fusion production and limiting other stuff. I mean, the good thing is that because of the climate in Bangalore, the whiskey matures quicker. I mean, yes, there's less off it, but you can get the turnaround is quicker than it would be in Scotland. Um, so that's a blessing in disguise. I think that it's all because Amrut's base ethos of quality over quantity, and so they're going to focus on quality. They're not going to rush anything. Not going to build a huge mega plant that is going to pump out whiskey nonstop. That's not something they want to do. I mean, don't forget, they are also making other products for the domestic market: gin, vodka, brandy, a bunch of other stuff. But the single malts are growing, and demand is there, and I think it'll continue to go. But don't forget, there's what Amrut did was open the door to other Indian single malts coming into the marketplace, and so the whole category of Indian single malts is being elevated. So, competition is a good thing. It's not, it just makes more people aware that there's something else out there. And I'm not, I'm not concerned that Amrut's going to lose its stature. I mean, I think the quality is there and will continue to be there, and the the demand for it will continue to be there, and we just have to make sure we can fill that.
So I'm going to ask a question about the interplay of different of the Indian whiskey market domestically. Before I do, should we go Narangi first or rye first for the last two?
Do the rye first, and then we'll finish off with the Naranki.
All right.
So this is and that now, if you made this in Scotland, you couldn't call it a single malt. But it's not made in Scotland, so it's 100% malted rye. So therefore it is a single malt rye. This is the second time that Amrut has done this, and like the Trabarva, this is the last time they're going to do it. So enjoy this. I'm giving you two that you're going to rave about, and unfortunately, in 5 years or 10 years, no one will be able to find them. But as working with rye, and your listeners know, rye is very difficult to work with. It gums up the equipment. So you spend time in making that, then you've got to spend a lot of time cleaning everything out. You thoroughly have to clean it before you can go back to making distilling malt. So this is the last time they're doing it. The rye comes from Northern Europe. It was malted in England for Amrut to their specifications, and then shipped to the distillery where everything else was done.
So did you? I know you were saying you had to work with rye. It's a difficult grain. Did the actual production, I guess, method and setup of the stills and all that, did any of that have to change
No,
for the rye?
no, no.
So otherwise it was straight as a single malt.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. So double distilled, again, the same long fermentation. What you'll note on this, David, it is very different from other ryes. I mean, it's not, it has that spicy note, which you always get from rye, but it's not, a spice bomb, so to speak.
No, not at all. I usually pick up a rye spice as it'll attack the tip of my tongue. A lot of black pepper, like I'm just dipping, like I'm doing a hot sauce challenge and just tipping the very tip of my tongue there. But this actually kind of skips the tip and goes mid tongue forward.
Yeah.
So it's not, as you said, it's not a spice bomb. It's more, I would almost say cooling spices around there, and some like a little white pepper, but controlled for sure. And the malting, I'm sure, controls
time,
that.
as it sits on your palate, you'll notice you'll start to get that little spice tingle at the front of the tongue. And then the flavors will just continue to grow and develop. And
having the rye malted, it just adds so much more complexity to this.
Yeah. You don't see too many 100% malted ryes out there. There are a couple of domestic distillers that make it. But again, it's rare only because it's such a difficult grain to work with, and when you do 100% rye, you have to, then, as I said, clean out all your equipment, and you're losing all that time where you could be producing something else.
Right. And you're starting with a grain that's already more expensive than, let's say, in the US, corn or wheat. So it's already more expensive grain. Then you do the extra stuff of malting. So yeah, it adds up to something that, while it could be delicious, and often is, I've been fortunate to try a few malted ryes from the US. They're delicious, but I can see how, from a cost benefit analysis and from a production standpoint, it's just not a sustainable thing.
Correct. Yeah.
Now, speaking of the grain in particular, Amrut, as far as I'm aware, except for the malt that is brought in peated, is otherwise using 100% Indian malt.
Yes. However, they they have their own small malting floor at the distillery, which occasionally they will still use. And they found a maltster in India that has been able to get peat, and it has malted Indian barley in India using peat from Scotland. And but those have been only very rare releases. We did one of the Atma, which Atma is the single cask that we do for the US. It's got the red tube with the elephant on it. And we did one malted Indian, sorry, peated Indian barley release. We only got 90 bottles out of the cask.
Wow.
Yeah. But that's, yeah, it's totally different when you take the Indian barley and you peat that. It's a different flavor profile than when you're doing barley from Scotland that's been peated.
So I have to ask, was the decision to do a rye just kind of to see if it would work and try it out?
Yeah, I mean, it's Rick and his brother-in-law and the family give Ashok free reign in whatever he's doing. So he's sort of occasionally he's like the mad scientist. He'll do something without telling anybody, and then just see how it comes out. So yeah, the first time they did the rye was an experiment. He's currently experimenting with barley from a number of different countries to see how that's going to come out. He's experimenting with a couple of yeast strains to see what difference that makes. So yeah, they're working on different things. I mean, there's a lot of the incentive or innovations from Amrut, the different cask types, different types of product that they've done has been Ashok's ideas. Spectrum, which was the cask that was made out of 4 or 5 different types of wood staves. That was Ashok's idea, that he had a middle of the night epiphany that we need to do this. So
I have to say, I did get to try the Spectrum. I don't know which edition it was, unfortunately, but whichever one it was something that really sticks out in your memory. It was not only just a very good whiskey on its own, but you said with 4 or 5 different woods making up the staves, the flavors were so intense and varied,
yeah,
even more so than if you had, I think I'm estimating this in my head, but I feel like it felt like when I was drinking it, that even if you had aged the same whiskey in these 4 or 5 different casks of the same wood and then blended them later, it wouldn't have been the same. There's
no,
something about
you're right.
having all those oils and esters and aldehydes at the same time working
Yeah,
together that was just incredibly special.
yeah.
And to kind of drive this point home, I mentioned earlier the Porto Novo, and Amrut, I think has, if I heard right, has had or has, there, I got to pick up another one of those. Has as many as 42 different varieties of single malt
So far, yes,
so
42 or
far.
44. Yeah.
Yeah. So the second time I went down to Kentucky, I did a 6-day trip, 4 days in Kentucky, 2 days in Tennessee, and I hit a lot of the major distilleries and all that. It was a pretty packed tour, but I made sure to try to go to the restaurants too that I had seen and bars and such. And one of the ones I went to was Doc Crow's.
Yep.
It's a place that it's for bourbon, especially maybe some rye, but you're really known for bourbon.
Yep.
I went in and I was ordering definitely some kind of lesser known ones. I was trying, and the guy came back a couple of times, each time more apologetically and saying, "I'm sorry, we can't find this one," or "This bottle's gone," or "Someone else took it," or whatever. And at a certain point, I just said, "All right, um, let's try something different here." So I looked down the list and I see they have 2 Amruts there. Uh, it was, and they two they had, there was the Spectrum and the Porto Nova.
Mm.
And so in the middle of Kentucky in Louisville at Doc Crow's, those were the 2 whiskeys that I had. And I'm not mad about it. I'm happy I did it because I hadn't had, I don't think at that point I had Amrut at all.
Mm.
Maybe I'd had the classic single malt. I don't really remember, but for me, those were my first experiences with it. And
Mm.
so in some way everything that comes after it is kind of marked against that, which is and is not fair,
Yeah,
of course.
right, right.
But
Yeah.
it's worth pointing out that story just because again, when you're in a place that you think you should just be drinking bourbon, that's what made me go to the Amrut because it was something different. I knew that whether I
Mm,
liked it or not, it was going to be different,
yeah.
and thankfully, I did like it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting that, the first couple of times I did a whiskey show in Louisville, yeah, most people would walk by because we didn't have any bourbon. And then I remember that 2 years later, when I was doing it, people were like, "Do you have anything that's not bourbon?" I'm like, "Yes, you came to the right place." And it was, the whole, I think people, and not that people are getting tired of bourbon, but they're saying, "Okay, I've had bourbon. What else is out there?" And I think that the people are branching out in the brown spirits category, which is great for us. Great for the world whiskey category, world single malts, which now are coming from all over the place. But it's incredible. I mean, we were the first ones to bring in single malts from India, England, Australia, Czech Republic, a few other things, and back then, it was a pretty small marketplace for world whiskeys, and now there's, name a country, and there's single malts coming out from them. So it's uh,
Yeah,
it's quite incredible.
there's one right now. I think I want to say in Romania, Carpathian single malt
Yes.
that
Yeah.
I've been trying to get in touch with them because I keep seeing them all over. They just seem to be bursting onto the scene, and I really want to talk to them because I
Yeah.
haven't had a Carpathian single malt
Yeah. Yeah.
before.
Well, there's that. There's the one from Lebanon.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
Riachi. Yeah, I had them
yeah.
had Roy on. That was a great one.
Yeah. Roy's
Uh,
great. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and actually tonight I'm going to the Cotswolds, which is not new whiskey,
Oh, yeah.
not new world whiskey, but still a newer distillery making a different style. So, but yeah, the idea of just going and trying from different countries, not just the big five, and arguably, I don't know how you feel about this. Arguably, from both a volume and demand standpoint, it should really be the big six with India joining at this point.
Yeah, I agree. It should be, and it probably will be. I mean, I was in February. I was in Japan for the World Whiskey Forum, and we heard from people from New Zealand, from Denmark, for the Sweden, Iceland, that were there, and but I mean, missing. I know that there's whiskey production, single malt production going on in Argentina, Brazil, which, and somebody, I just saw something they're doing. It's not distilled in Antarctica, but they're maturing it in Antarctica.
I
I
did
just
see
saw
something like
something
that.
about that
Yeah, they were
recently.
trying to get like all seven continents involved
Right,
in that.
right. So, who knows if what difference that will make, or if it will,
Yeah.
but it's just incredible to see all of these different things going on.
And I do want to talk about that too. I know I keep getting ahead of myself because there's so many questions to ask, but uh, before I forget, I did want to ask in with this rapid growth that the Indian whiskey market, especially single malts, but it sounds like beyond just single malts as well,
Yeah.
the domestic market, export market, everything with this, we have more distilleries popping up, as many as as many as 300 something total distilleries in the country.
Correct. Yeah.
Not all making whiskey necessarily, but
Right.
distilling.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm always curious when countries undergo these rapid growth spurts about how the distilleries work with each other, both on a level playing field, but also from the lens of, let's say, the founders, the big core group, the heritage distillers in the US work with the smaller, newer ones, and if they work together.
I mean, some of them do. They're friends. They will share ideas. They'll talk about things. But there's, every state in India has its own distiller or distillery or distilleries. Plural. There are a number of states in India that are dry, no alcohol.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
no legal alcohol, right?
Sure. Yeah.
You actually, actually more consumed there. But but aside from that, there's not all of them are new. A lot of those distilleries have been around since the 40s, the 50s. After the British left, there was obviously everyone saw a demand for it, and some of them went from brewing to distilling, or a combination of. There's still a lot of there's still a lot of sugarcane production in India, so a lot of that sugarcane gets distilled into those neutral spirits, which are the base for a lot of other products. But the newer distilleries, they cooperate with each other. They talk. Discuss ideas. But there are different, just like in the U.S., every state in India has different regulations. Not only the federal regulations, but you have different local regulations as too you have to deal with. So, in some places it's easier, like in Goa, where Paul John's based. It's a pretty free market, and lower alcohol taxes, and you can have a tasting center at your distillery, and sell stuff there and everything else. Where in Karnataka, where Amrut's based, you cannot. And in fact, you go into the distillery, and right in the distillery building sits the excise officer, who is there all the time, and to watch what's going on and making sure that there's no alcohol being taken out of there that shouldn't be that is not subject to tax and everything else like that. So, there's different environments that you're dealing with.
And to follow up on that in a certain way, do you, in the spirit of cooperation and furthering the larger whiskey scene in India, the rising tide lifts all boats mentality, do the leaders of these distilleries, including Ashok, do any kind of, let's say, mentorship, apprenticeship type thing where they'll teach others how to distill, and then they'll go into other
Yep,
distilleries?
they're starting to, because Ashok recognizes that he needs to train somebody up. That he's means that he'll be 50 this year, so he's still pretty young. But his second passion after whiskey is golf, and he'd much rather be on the golf course than making whiskey. But the plan is eventually he will have somebody trained up that will start distilling. He still has people working for him. He's not there all the time, but the distillery is operating 24/7, just because of the demand, and except when they do their regular maintenance shutdown. But yeah, he does have other people working for him that have different responsibilities. And but right now, the ultimate decision maker is Ashok. He's got a couple of people that work with him on doing things. And certainly I know when I go visit there, I'm tasting barrel samples and new things and making suggestions about things. So I'll be there in September and get to pick some new barrels to bring back to the US, which is always a lot of fun. But yeah, I think that's happening. And that leads to another challenge in India, David, is that because of the demand and because of all these distilleries popping up, there are not enough qualified people in India, trained in India, to be able to fill the demand on the technical side of distilling. So there are a lot of people coming over from overseas to work there, but I'm hoping that ultimately some of these larger operations will train up people and bring people on domestically on board to be able to work the marketplace, work the distillery.
Or it's kind of a traditional supply and demand, and with this, actually, I'm going to open up and pour the Narangi, Narangi or Narangi, I should say.
Narangi, Harji, yeah.
Harji.
Very similar to the Spanish word naranja. It means orange. So this is a very special whiskey that if you look at the back label, it'll say the batch number.
Yes, this is batch 18.
18. Okay, so they made Narangi a number of times. So this was again another innovation from Ashok that we were talking about citrus notes. And Amrut, one of the core flavor profiles of Amrut is that orangey, citrusy note.
Hmm.
And Ashok wanted to find a way to enhance that. So you can't, as you know, you cannot add anything to whiskey, right? The U.S.
Hmm.
regulations, Scottish regulations, and call it whiskey. So what he thought was there's these small oranges that grow in not far from on the foothills in the Blue Mountains, close to the distillery, and they're sort of green, a little greeny and orange on the outside, but the peel, but and the fruit's a little tart. But they got 2 kilos, so 8 pounds of orange peel, and sent it down to the bodega they work with, and had them put the orange peel into a cask of sherry, seal up the barrel, and left it for 3 years so that the sherry would take out the oils from the orange peel, would flavor the barrel, and then the barrels were emptied and shipped back to Amrut to be used. So, and then they were filled with the single malt it's a single malt that was first matured, and then it goes into these ex orange sherry barrels for another 3 to 4 years to create Narangi.
Off the nose, it's immediately apparent that, well, I would say it's immediately apparent there's an orange note, but it's also not typical orange. It's not like a navel orange or something you pick up at the grocery store.
Yeah.
It's something different.
Yeah.
And I can almost get some of that tartness. Maybe it's power of suggestion, but it's I like it though. It's not overly sweet. And I when I first heard the methodology behind this, it made sense to me. I mean, there are certainly other people who've kind of done similar ideas, and I don't want to call it a loophole because that I think would demean the process a bit. But it's very smart. You're right. You can't add, like, you couldn't throw orange peels in whiskey and still call it whiskey. At least not in most countries with whiskey regulations.
Right.
But you can do whatever you want to that previous cask and then finish in that cask. So, and I think I harp on this because we've seen so many finishes, both
Mhm.
uh, within the realm of reasonability, and then some of them that were kind of on the borderline, then some that were just ridiculous. In recent years, finishing was a huge trend and still is,
Yeah.
to a certain
Still
extent.
is. Yeah.
But I think I hope we're leaning into a new era of finishing where we're doing things like this. It's more thought out. It's not just for the flavor to get like a chocolate seasoned barrel or something. It's
Right.
because we want to really delve into, oh, this is a regional orange from the foothills of the Blue Mountains that only grows there. We're going to partner up with this bodega, as you said, that you're already using. So it won't be a total departure for those people who have had sherry finished Amruts. But it'll add something very nice to it and different, and adds to that 42 or 44 collection of single malts.
Yes. Yep. And as I said, it was, they're inherently in the flavor profile of Amrut classic single malt, that orangey notes are there. And
Mhm.
this was just a way to enhance that and bring that more to the forefront.
Mm. It definitely got, I mean, of course, plenty of the orange. It has the tartness is similar in level to like sweet tarts candy.
Mhm.
So still sweet, still tart, not like, warheads level tartness. Um, I am not sure if I'm getting a ton of the sherry. I think the orange and the Oloroso together are leaning more towards the orange. It's
Mhm.
not necessarily a bad thing. It's more just a comment on it.
Mhm.
But despite another 3 to 4 years of finishing in these casks, that I imagine would have pretty significant flavor in them after a couple of years themselves of being seasoned, you can still taste the base Amrut spirit, that floral
Yeah.
fruitiness that's characteristic, and the mouthfeel too, that's characteristic of it.
Well, which is interesting because, you mentioned Porto Nova, but have you had the intermediate sherry?
I don't think I have.
So the intermediate sherry is, as the name suggests, the sherrying is in the middle process. So they take the single malt, they then put it into a Oloroso sherry butt, and then after about 3 years, they'll put it back into an ex-bourbon cask. And the
Mm.
reason they did that is when they first wanted to do a sherried whiskey, they found the sherried flavor overpowered the flavor profile of Amrut. And by putting it back into ex-bourbon after that time in the sherry barrel, it helped to sort of not neutralize, but like bring down the sherry influence and still allow the core flavors of Amrut to come through.
Makes sense. I'm blanking on the name. There's one other distillery that I know that did something similar. Like they went right into sherry casks. I think I don't think they started with the ex bourbon. They went right into sherry and then had to put it in ex bourbon afterwards because the sherry was so strong they had to pull it back.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure I'll think of it at 2 a.m. tonight, but
yeah. Yeah,
no,
sometimes that happens. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, it's different from if you look back in Scotland from, in the 1800s, 1900s, when sherry barrels were actually shipped with sherry from Spain,
Mhm.
before the regulations changed in the 80, 89, 81. I can't remember the year. And so those ex sherry barrels, once they were emptied, who knows how long they were on the ship, who knows how long they sat in the warehouse, but when they were emptied and they were filled with new make whiskey for maturation, you had sherry barrels that were a lot more intense in flavor.
Mhm.
Whereas today, the barrels are being created for the distilleries, and they're being seasoned maybe a couple of years at the most, 18 months to 2 years of sherry being in the barrels to season them, and then emptying and being shipped. Last year when I was in Jerez, I got the privilege of going to a certain bodega, and they had 20 warehouses, and every warehouse that when he opened it up had a particular distillery's casks in there. And I was not allowed to take any photos, and I'm not allowed to say who they were, but it was really interesting that this was the particular bodega that was doing it for a number of whiskey producers around the world.
And to your point, the sherry that's being used now to season these casks is not. Sometimes it is with the really high end bodegas, but it's not always good quality sherry that you really want to drink.
It is not.
It's
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 not.
really
It's
just for seasoning the
basically,
cask.
yeah. I mean, it's like remember before they outlawed Paxaret, that was
Mhm.
a sherry extract that was used to flavor barrels and sometimes added to it. Now it's just trying to, okay, let's see how quickly we can get some sherry seasoning into the barrel before we can fill it with whiskey.
Exactly. So I wanted to kind of to close our discussion on a what I hope will be a positive topic, but I know it's a little bit threatening with the thing. And it has to do with just consumer fatigue and trends that we're seeing right now in the industry. And it plays into how Amrit is coming into the market still, how it's being seen worldwide, and also just how other brands and other industries are. And so 2 years ago, pardon me, 2 years ago, you and Ashok were both on a whiskey cast happy hour with
Mhm.
Mark Gillespie, for those who don't listen to whiskey cast. And these are your words. You said Mark asked you if you were expecting a market correction at some point for whiskey. And you said you were expecting a correction in late 2023 and early 2024 that'll happen in the US first because they have too many places making bourbon, prices are getting out of control. You foresee consumer fatigue and some distilleries closing down. Now, I got to say, that is prescient as hell
Yep.
because you're that's exactly what we're seeing. You nailed the time, you nailed what was happening, and we're seeing right now. We're
Mhm.
seeing distilleries go under. We're seeing consumer fatigue. Secondary markets are basically not even moving nowadays. They're except for these very high end bottles that are always move. And you can attribute it to a couple of things, obviously different things like inflation, global conflicts, but there's nothing in particular that has happened that is necessarily different from any other year. Every year there's a global conflict. Every year there's inflation somewhere or deflation in other places. So I guess I'm curious now that you've been basically proven right in your forecasting. The last part that you said of that was that for continued growth and for a bright outlook, look to the global south, including India, including, as you mentioned before, distilling in South America now, Australia, New Zealand, areas that are considered New World whiskey, not part of the Big Five. And I, for one, I think I've had one South American whiskey, and just one. I haven't tried anything else. It's more piscos and raicillas and things like that. So looking to, let's say, the next couple of years, now that we've hit this potential bust or downturn in the market, where do you see this growth happening? Do you still think the global south is the next place to look?
Yeah, there's still a lot happening in the global south. I mean, I mentioned New Zealand earlier. I mean, there are, you know, 10, 12 distilleries in New Zealand. Australia continues to grow. I mean, the demand is domestically, the demand is there for those countries. Most of the production gets consumed domestically. Exporting is costly to get it out there, but it does come over. I'm happily me talking to a distillery from New Zealand that I've been wooing for a few years, and I'm hoping that soon we'll be able to get some of their product over here. I quite like what they're doing. But also don't discount you mentioned South, but don't discount south of Scotland. So I'm talking
Mm,
about England.
sure.
A lot going on in England. The climate's different. The getting different whiskey out of there. I mean, you mentioned you're gonna see Cotswolds this evening. I mean,
Mhm.
they're making great whiskeys, great gin as well, and um, really focus on what they're doing. They're so I think that is something that's going to keep the whole category of world whiskey brown spirits alive. I think there's people will look for what else is there, what else is out there, and they're getting tired of consumers are getting tired of paying 150, $200 for a 4-year-old, 5-year-old bottle of bourbon. I'm sure I'll get some criticism from this, but to me, bourbon, for the most part, is homogeneous. There isn't a lot of diversification or variation in them. When you get that corn base, obviously that sweetness is going to be there. Yes, there's differences, but not as varied as single malts are going to be. I mean, single malts, both from the US and worldwide, there's so many, it's small batch, right? It's one run, and you're going to get different variations from that. We're already starting to see demand growth for American single malts, which is great. I mean, raising that whole category is fabulous. Um, I'm concerned still that with all these new bourbon distilleries that are propping up and being built, and they're all relying upon, oh, we've got contracts and we're going to be able to supply that. Well, yeah, you got a contract, but if your customer goes bankrupt, who are you going to sell it to? You can't
Mhm.
rely upon that. And likewise in Scotland, I mean, all these distilleries that are popping up or just released whiskey, or will started distilling last year, or will be this year or the next few years. There's, where's all that going to go? The domestic markets are not growing, population is not growing. So yeah, you can look to China and India and the US, France, the typical markets that have always been great supporters of single malt. But everyone's fighting for shelf space. You go into a retailer gets offered anywhere from 60 to 100 new products a week. And I'm just not whiskey, but everything, wine, RTDs, all that stuff. And, somebody walks in and goes, oh, cool, I got new. Well, they're just going to go, well, where am I going to put it? Yeah, it's great, but where am I going to put it? There's no room. So it's one of the biggest challenges is, yeah, some great products out there, but how do you get it to consumers? And unfortunately, in the US, one of the biggest challenges that small producers have is getting to market, and their e-commerce for liquor is um, so backward or so primitive in the US compared to Europe and other markets, and that's a big challenge to me. Unless we start to see changes to that to make it easier for consumers to get product, it's going to continue being a challenge.
I hear you. Count me among those who are kind of I'm getting a little tired of bourbon, to be honest. I've been saying to a lot of people recently, I can only write brown sugar and caramel so many times and baking spice.
Yep.
There are, to be sure, there are plenty of smaller distillers that are around the country and around the world that are making interesting spirits. I guess it's only in the country if I'm speaking of bourbon specifically, but there are ones you can look at to keep it exciting, to keep it different. But I agree, we've got to, in order to keep things interesting, we've got to diversify. And it's no longer the world where in our fathers, grandfathers, great grandfathers, where they had their one whiskey brand and they just stuck to that whiskey brand for their entire life. My great uncle drank Johnny Walker Black. He and his wife both drank Johnny Walker Black, a glass each, till the day they passed in their 90s. And that's great, but that's no longer the world we live in and the consumers you're facing. So this makes me really excited talking to people like you who are bringing in spirits from around the world, introducing us to new spirits, not just the core of Amrut, but also these releases that are limited, that are some of which, like the rye and the Triparva, that'll never happening again. And it's exciting. And I know it's audio again, but I'm smiling very brightly at the end of this question, because as much as we see consumer fatigue, I think there's a lot to look for people who are interested in whiskey, in rum in particular too, and from the New World. So with that, Raj, I'll thank you again for returning to the podcast. You are a friend of the podcast and always welcome to come back. And I really encourage people to not only try all of the expressions that we've tried here today, but to look for all the Amrut products. I have yet to have one that I do not like, and I really mean that. But especially look for the Triparva, that's going to be totally different. The rye, that is, both of these going to run out. Look for the Narangi if you're a fan of kind of an orange flavor or enhancing that orange flavor in the original Amrut that you like. And if there are other brands that you would like us to talk about, you like Raj on here, you want to come back here and talk more, go to glassrevimports.com. His company, Glass Revolution Imports, brings in so many different wonderful high quality brands. And he's not paying me to say this. I say this of my own volition. And I'd be happy to talk about any one of them. So Raj, thank you so much.
David, thanks again. It's great to spend some time with you and catch up. And I'm glad I just got back from South Africa on Tuesday, so I'm glad I was able to stay awake. I didn't fall asleep with jet lag, but yeah.
Absolutely. I will let you go in a minute. Just hang on for me with just 1 second after recording. This has been another episode of the Whisky Ring Podcast, and I will see you all next week. Hey folks, thanks for listening to another episode of the Whisky Ring Podcast. If you like what you hear, please go ahead and click that subscribe, follow, or like button. Leave a rating and review on your podcast app of choice, and let me know what you want to hear. You can reach out to me through the podcast apps or email me at david@whiskymyweddingring.com with any suggestions or ideas for new show guests. You can also support the podcast at patreon.com/whiskey in my wedding ring. That's whiskey with an E, for as little as $1 a month. $5 a month gets you access to bonus content, including our soon-to-resume Under the Influencer series, and $25 a month means you join the Barrel Share Club. Each month, Barrel Share Club members get to try products sent to me for review, bottles from my own collection, and sometimes bottles that I just pick up because they're fun or interesting. Right now, only 5 spots remain in the Barrel Share Club, so grab your place today. Finally, please follow on Instagram. You can follow me at Whiskey in My Wedding Ring or at Whiskey Ring Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at Whiskey Ring. You can follow on Facebook at Whiskey in My Wedding Ring or join the Facebook group, the Whiskey Ringers group. And I hope to see you there. Cheers, thank you for the support, and see you next time.